Nerd alert, nerd alert. It's almost time for season 2 of Our Nerdiest Thing, coming in March 2023. We will be reading Jennifer L. Armentrout's From Blood and Ash, and as always, we are spoiler friendly, so get to reading. I'm Whitney.
I'm Mindy.
And I'm Deb.
We're 3 best friends who love nerdy things.
Well, some people think we're nerdy, but we think we're pretty awesome.
This is Our Nerdiest Thing.
This season, we are discussing A Court of Thorns and Roses and all of Sarah J. Maas's books. We are spoiler friendly, so listen at your own risk. Hello, fellow nerds. Welcome to Our Nerdiest Thing. Today we're talking about A Court of Thorns and Roses, chapters 36, 37, and 38. And to get started, we're going to do our nerdiest recap. Mindy, can you spin the wheel?
The wheel has been spun, and we have a winner, and it's Deb.
All right, Whitney, tell me when I'm ready.
Ready and go.
Okay, so Feyre gets taken into the first trials against the Wyrm, W-Y-R-M, and she figures out really quickly that it's blind, so she covers herself in mud and creates like this little like spiky pit for the worm and makes herself bleed, and it chases her, and she goes into the pit, and then it dies. And the best part is she throws a bone at Amarantha like a javelin, and mud gets all over her. In the meantime, she breaks her arm while she's fighting the worm. Oh, crap. And then Rhysand comes and heals her and gives her a bargain, and then she has to stay with him 1 week a month. That sucked. Sorry.
No, there's a lot that happens.
Yeah,
we were talking about that earlier.
These chapters are jam-packed.
It's really hard to do 30 seconds of the last section of the book.
Countdown. I mean, I feel like 30 seconds sounds like forever, but
It's
it
really
really
not.
is 2 sentences.
Yeah, I remember when I have no understanding of time, and when I'm talking about something I really am into like this, I remember I gave a book report in high school, and it was supposed to be like 5 to 7 minutes, and when I finished, I looked at the clock and I had talked for 25.
And your teacher's back there. Do you remember the Wrap It Up box by Dave Chappelle? Wrap it up, yo.
She didn't do that. She just let me keep talking.
And see, I was the kid that it was like, it had to be 5 to 7 minutes, and I got to 4, and I'm like, shit, I got to stretch it out.
BS
Like,
my way through.
So,
Yeah, it was bad news bears for me, but that's okay. Mindy, will you do our nerdiest vocabulary?
I would love to. Before I get into the actual word or name as it is that I'm going to talk about, I had a revelation about something that we've talked about here on the podcast before, and it's word related, so I thought I would throw it in here. So this whole time I've been saying definitely that FF was freshly fucked, and
is it not?
that no way hang on and that it was something that everybody knew about, obviously.
No, just you and your raunchy ass husband.
Well, apparently so, because I was talking to Darren about it. He goes, "Min, we made that up."
So we know if it becomes a thing that started here on Our Nerdiest Thing. TM trademark FF.
FF. Yep.
Yeah. You guys made that up?
Apparently so. I'm like, it's one of those things.
Okay,
You know how
so-
something like just becomes such a part of your life that
Yeah.
you think it's just always been there? Mm-hmm. Apparently.
So
it's
now
not.
everyone you looked at, including me, that you went, you don't know
You don't know
what
what that
FF
is?
is?
God, you all stupid.
You were so judgmental, Mindy.
You don't know anything about mine and Darren's inside joke.
That is hilarious.
Anyway,
I love that.
I thought I would clear the air on that. I decided to, because he's such a prominent character in these chapters, I wanted to do a little research on the name Rhysand. So,
Is he in the Urban Dictionary as BDE?
oh, just wait.
Oh, great.
Just you wait. So, it's a name that's of Welsh origin, and in English it means enthusiasm. I know.
I'd rather it means stamina.
It could go together.
I know some people are too enthusiastic. You know what I'm saying?
The name often gets shortened to Rhys, obviously, and which that means ardent or fire, or it can mean passion or enthusiasm. I thought was very appropriate. But the Akatar Wiki says that it means perfection, bringer of darkness. Mm-hmm. So those were little interesting tidbits. But then, of course, I had to go to the Urban Dictionary, and they had a lot to say about the name Rhysand. Some of it not flattering. Buckle up because this is fun. So the first entry in the Urban Dictionary says that Rhysand means the hottest fae to ever exist. Agreed. It is said his dick size can be determined by his wingspan. Mm-hmm. He is a feminist and the perfect one for Feyre. Fuck Tamlin. He is also known by these names: prick, wallfucker, liquor of cursebreaker, table and paint fucker. I don't know who named him that, but
liquor of
the curse breaker.
Oh my gosh!
Right?
Well, he does feast a lot.
Yeah, but that feels like somebody's trying to make it an insult. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does.
This one is actually pretty, well, somewhat positive. It takes a turn. So still in that same entry, he is the inventor of feminism and creator of the Me Too movement. He has the biggest wingspan in Fae Dick, which I don't think he does. Didn't they say that?
Azriel
Azriel does. Yeah,
that's what more and Feyre say.
Which was how he was able to get notice of Feyre from the pile of shit Tamlin. So, and then the last bit of their entry says his titles are High Lord of the Night Court, Rice Male, I don't know what that means, Our Feminist King, in quotes, Reese's Pieces, and sex offender number 3756056 on the National Sex Offender Registry.
What?
Right? I guess weird. He's like 500 years old and Feyre's 19. Like,
maybe, or that he was someone's whore for 50 years.
Yeah,
maybe
that should put Amarantha on the registry,
right?
Not
She
him.
would be on the registry.
Anyway, I thought that was interesting. They get better.
I object to this.
They actually get better. This one says he is 6'3" in height and 14'3" in dick length. He has numerous angst black tattoos that your niece will one day get on her knee. So specific stuff happened to this family, apparently. He has
some mad grandfathers writing this.
He has night black hair and star-filled violet eyes, being the genetic demon child of Marilyn Manson and Elizabeth Taylor. Reese's most notable feature is his Illyrian wingspan. Okay, so that one,
I realize I've gone to several of the things you've said.
Okay, now this one takes a real. This person clearly doesn't like.
They're the one Tamlin fan that in all the groups is like, let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
No, they clearly have a problem with the age difference. So they say a 536-year-old pedophile with a fairy peen. Rhysand is known for his most notable achievements of murdering teenager girls, sexually harassing teenage girls, sexually assaulting teenage girls, regularly assaulting teenage girls, and somehow being the wet dreams of millions of teen girls and 33-year-old virgin white women worldwide.
Okay, first of all,
I have a lot to say.
Well,
we do not condone this.
I do want to say, yes, Feyre is 19, but she is of legal age.
Yeah.
It's when you say teen, it makes it sound like she's 15, and she's not.
Well, I'm just saying, clearly somewhere out there, somebody has a problem with this age difference. But I'm like, get over it. We're in a different world. It's not like we're in America.
It's make-believe.
That sounds like it was written by a guy who got dumped by a girl who really loves these books. You know what I mean?
Or she was like, Rhysand does more to me in this book than you can in real life.
Yes.
Yeah, he definitely is.
Get better at sex, bro.
I mean, that's just factually incorrect, those assertions. I'm getting too worked up about this for being just like an Urban Dictionary entry about a fictional,
you gotta remember
fictional character.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is other people's opinions, and
they're wrong.
And they're wrong. Yeah. So, I don't know. Maybe that was the only ones I think that were in there, so maybe we need to go back and put some more positive vibes in there for poor Rhys.
Yeah.
I want to know if the Cassian one talks about the Pringles can. If you could report back on that next week, that would be great.
I don't even know what to say.
I don't think you would be saying anything.
What is it in Silver Flames? It's like Nesta's mouth dries out immediately. Like, oh no. Oh no.
Oh no, don't keep going.
Yeah. Anyway, so at the beginning of this section, Feyre is being brought to her first trial, right? And she has no idea what to expect. She hasn't been told anything about these except that Amarantha expects her to die, right? Because in the last section, she said, I hope there's something left for me to mess with. And she knows that it's a full moon. So she walks into this room, which I thought was interesting. She says it was hewn from the rock, which made me think of the hewn city in the Court of Nightmares. And I wonder if there's a room like this or like an arena like this somewhere in the Court of Nightmares, because I don't think we see anything like that.
It would make sense that there's an arena in the Court of Nightmares.
Yeah,
Right.
totally. I think it's interesting too that they walk her in and she makes a point to say that she's not shackled. She's not, they find her so
They're
insignificant
mocking
as
her the whole
for
time.
sure.
They're like,
what's the point?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's rough to know. It's not even worth trying to subdue me because what am I going to do? Yeah, like I'm completely powerless. I am so interested. She talks about all these high fae who are so excited to watch this. And I'm like, okay, I need names. I need courts. Like who exactly? Because I can
Whose
imagine.
ass are you going to go kick?
Right. Well, I can imagine that like Baron, right, the High Lord of the
for
Autumn
sure.
Court, and his kids, at
Well,
least
all
a few
the high
of
lords
them
are there.
Right. Well, but not all of them look excited,
True.
right? Like some of them, she's talking about people that are like thrilled about it. And I want names and locations. Tamlin is given a place of honor next to Amarantha on this dais, while the other High Lords are all standing around it. Feyre mentions that Amarantha has her hand on Tamlin's knee. And she says Amarantha basically says Rhysand told her that Feyre was a huntress, which I thought was really interesting because I can almost... So she said, basically, Rhysand told me that you're a huntress, so I'm giving you something to hunt, right? Like, that's going to be your first trial.
I had a question about that. How does he find out she's a huntress?
Well, he got in her mind the second time he came to Spring Court.
But, I mean, I guess he could have. I thought he was really just rummaging about Tamlin, but...
I mean, he would have been able to see that she hunted, though, right?
True,
and also...
I just thought that was because she actually specifically thought about that and said,
Yeah.
"Oh, did he get that out of my mind?" Or
Well, he's been having... I mean, Amarantha doesn't know this, but he's been having dreams.
True.
And, like, visions of her.
But how do we know Rhys told her? Maybe Tamlin was like, she hunts wild. Well, she knows that she had to kill that wolf. But maybe Tamlin was like, she'll kick your ass, bro. And she's a hunter.
I'm pretty sure that she said...
I wrote down that Amarantha says that Rhysand told her Feyre was a huntress.
Yeah, it's on... Well, it's in here. Rhysand tells me you're a huntress.
I guess you're supposed to assume that he got it out of her mind.
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting that she specifically like mulled that over in her mind, and I'm like, and it kind of made me think, well, how did he know that?
I think that he probably either way, he would say, well, I went into her mind when I was there the second time I went to the Spring Court, right?
Yeah.
But he may have seen it in his dreams or whatever. But I just thought it was interesting because I could absolutely see, we don't get to see this conversation, right? We don't get to see Rhysand telling her this. We just know that it happened. And I can absolutely see Rhysand downplaying it, downplaying her skill, downplaying
I mean,
what
she's
she
just
can
a
actually...
human.
Yes.
She hunts, but it's nothing.
Knowing that Amarantha's going to take this information about Feyre and use it somehow against her in these trials, right? So my headcanon is that he downplayed her skills, knowing that she was probably going to get a trial where she could use those skills and give her the best chance.
He is the only one that bet that she would win.
Yeah. Yeah. The only one.
So, what's interesting is that Sarah J. Maas could have spent a bunch of time writing how terrifying the pit was before the fight with the Wyrm actually starts. She could have spent a bunch of time writing that. She could have spent a bunch of time describing more about like Amarantha's like point of view, but instead, all she does very cleverly is go. Amarantha goes, run.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
And it literally makes your stomach drop. It
Yeah,
was
that's
such
so
a
scary.
simple.
It was blood curdling for me. I
Yeah.
mean, it made my skin crawl. I was like, ooh.
It's such a simple way
Yeah.
to make the reader get scared for her.
Yeah.
To have someone that evil look at you and go, Bitch, you better run.
Yeah, that I didn't like that. The only other thing that I noticed before it all starts with the worm is Tamlin doesn't show any kind of emotion at all. Like, even, the adder picks her up and drops her into this pit, right? And he doesn't show any emotion even then, where I'm like, I think it's clear at the end of the trial that he was like really worried about her, right? Or at least she thinks that he is. We'll get there.
Yeah,
we'll get there.
I'm glaring at
Deb
Mindy
is already making faces.
Or Whitney. I'm like, no, he did not. I actually have something to say about that too.
I think that there's some evidence that he was concerned about her. However, it doesn't make any sense to me. If you see this human girl that you're supposed to love, that you think is probably going to her death right now, getting dropped into this pit, you can't give her anything.
Well, especially when you find out later that he begged.
Well, that's
for
what I was
Lucian.
just about to say.
Oh,
I'll just jump ahead to that.
I wrote down red flag.
I'm like,
caps.
you
that made me mad.
scream for Lucian's life, but if she's getting dropped into a pit with a man-eating worm that eats
You
cattle,
can't do anything.
Yep.
Yeah,
you don't
that
say
pissed me off,
anything.
There was,
Yeah.
maybe he's in love with Lucian.
It would make a lot of sense.
He fights way more for
Tamshin.
Lucian than he does
Tamshin, it's a thing.
Tamshin. Yeah, hashtag.
I ship it.
I like Lulin instead. I don't want to start with Tamlin.
Oh, Lulin.
Lulin.
Yeah,
Lulin.
I like that. But no, I wrote that down too. Like, he begs for Lucian's life, and because Rhysand says something like, he stopped the silent treatment so that he could beg for Lucian. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that is really crappy.
And Rhysand told her that on
I
purpose.
wrote down the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
he's nonchalantly like, oh yeah, he can beg for
Because
somebody.
Rhysand doesn't know why he's jealous yet, but he's definitely jealous.
Oh, I think he knows why he's jealous.
Well, the mating bond hasn't
think-
snapped yet.
No, but he has already been suspecting that she is his mate. And so he's purposefully trying to keep his distance so that I think it's so that the mating bond doesn't snap into place, because then he won't be able to hide it as well,
Right.
as good
As
well
as he did.
as well as he did.
Yeah. Thanks. On our website, it says that Whitney's the grammar nerd. ournerdiestthing.com if you'd like to learn more.
Well, Mindy, I know you wanted to talk about some stuff before we really get into what happens with the worm.
As I was reading this, even as they're walking her in and she's describing how all these people, all these fae are excited about this and there's flashing money around, it really struck me that it reminded me a lot of like gladiator trials and things that, like, I didn't know a whole lot about them, but I learned quite a bit. And but I thought to me it was very reminiscent of that. So I wanted to look in a little bit about what might be similar to these gladiator trials. So in ancient Rome, a gladiator would be a person, often a slave or captive, which is interesting, who was armed with a sword or other weapon and compelled to fight to the death in a public arena against another person or a wild animal for the entertainment of spectators. And that's like the definition, like the basic definition of it.
Can we also talk about, though, like every fantasy book right now is kind of doing this. And I want to point out Sarah J. Maas did this, 8 years ago? Mm-hmm. So like Savage Lands does it. She also does that in Throne of Glass, to be honest. I'm reading.
Oh, she does. I remember when they have they're fighting to be the main person.
Right. Yeah. And so like a lot of fantasy authors are kind of using that quote unquote trope of like the gladiator.
The gladiator.
Right.
Yeah. It's very interesting, and there's a lot out there, and I will not do it justice. So anybody who's like a gladiator connoisseur,
you know what I say? Fuck you. Get your own podcast.
But I do feel like we often kind of assume that a gladiator is someone who's trained to fight and trained to fight whatever they're fighting. So
it's because we're all thinking of Russell Crowe.
Just about to say, I think of Russell Crowe.
I probably know gladiators looked like that. They probably all looked like Feyre did, right?
Yeah.
Skinny and tiny.
And in Roman times, a lot of it was that. Like they would it started a lot smaller than it ended up, and it ended up being this big. It was a very political. It was very lavish, and it was a money making and a social scheme. I mean, there's so much tied to the gladiator fights, but there weren't all like that. There's actually quite a hierarchy of gladiators, which I had no idea. But in reality, most of them were usually slaves or criminals, and sometimes Christians. There was a point where they would put these Christians in as punishment, who were socially marginalized and segregated, even in death. So like they were not allowed like the kinds of like burials and funerals that other people had. And it did say that a lot of people think it originated, this whole gladiators culture originated at funerals, where they would have these two people fight to the death as like a tribute to the dead person. It was really weird.
That feels inappropriate.
It does.
Please don't do that at my funeral.
Mindy and I'll fight to the death.
No, don't.
But these gladiators and fighters, they actually were a huge part of politics and social life, but their value laid only in their ability to entertain the spectators. So a lot of gladiators, the ones that are officially called gladiators, were trained, and like people would sponsor them, and it felt very Hunger Games-ish to me too, also, where they would be sponsored and they would like learn, other people would train them and stuff like that, and that was their fighter. But this in ACOTAR, where she fights the Wyrm, feels a little bit different because she's not fighting another person, she's fighting a beast. And so actually, in this extensive list of different types of gladiators, which I'm not going to go into, I mean, there's like 25 of them, they're the ones that fought another human opponent are officially gladiators. The ones who fought beasts and animals are often mistakenly called glanimals.
Glanimals.
That's my new word. But are gladiators, but they are actually called bestiari, which the singular bestiari. Ooh, I didn't look up the
I was
pronunciation of
about
that.
to say, what happened?
Sorry. The singular is bestiarius. So these were considered the lowest ranking of any of the fighters, and often they didn't wear any armor and were not given really anything to fight with, which we see Feyre gets nothing. She gets thrown in there with nothing but her wits about, like she doesn't have any kind of weapon or anything. So that was interesting. And then often these beast fights were called damnatio ad bestias, which means condemnation of beasts. And it served as both a form of execution and entertainment. So like if these criminals or slaves or whatever were going to be executed, they would do one of these elaborate things.
Make a show of it.
Make a show of it.
Right, because they're not surviving a lion.
No.
Right.
And interestingly enough, they used lions a lot. They used bears, leopards, and tigers. So
lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my!
I was about to do the same exact thing. I was like, please say it.
So there was often gambling involved also, as we saw in this scene with Feyre. And then the Roman gladiator exhibitions were usually accompanied by fanfare, which she didn't really have that when she walked in. Like apparently they would have all these like, it would be like this big procession when you walked in, and they would have, and I thought this was funny, I included it. There was a procession into the arena, and there were presence of musicians such as, and this is what they're called, Ursus Tibicin, which is a flute-playing bear, and Polis cornicin, a horn-blowing chicken.
Okay,
So-
which one is more embarrassing, a horn-blowing chicken or a fiddle-playing Tamlin?
No, flute. Oh. Tamlin, 100%.
A Tamlin's more embarrassing, but I would be more impressed by the chicken.
I know, right?
Yeah. Which
Wow.
one? Now is the horn playing chicken hotter than a fiddle playing fae?
That's tough.
Yeah, that is tough.
That's a tough call.
Still too close to call you
Yeah,
guys.
that's a close call.
Horn
It's a
playing
toss-up.
chicken or fiddle playing fae? Which one makes you horny?
Playing Tamlin, that does not do it for me. But if
Even
it's
with his-
another
even with
maybe.
What if
cut-
Rhys played
Even
the
if his
fiddle?
Rhys
cuffs
can
rolled up.
play anything.
Rhys can play my
And I
fiddle.
would-
So let me ask you
He
this:
can cob my corn.
he can FF me. So even if Tamlin's, okay, just to speak in Sarah J. Maas talk, even if Tamlin's sleeve cuffs were rolled up to his elbows and his shirt was unbuttoned twice to show off his
Sculpted
bronze
chest.
Do you think
chest.
Tamlin in his human looking form was hairy? Had a hairy chest?
Not at all.
You don't think so?
No.
I think about Tamlin. I envision him as being kind of boyish looking.
Yeah.
You know?
See, I have pictures because he's
like with muscles, but like I don't
Like,
envision him
definitely
having
an
like,
adult,
I picture
but
him
like
as
a baby face,
like because
you know?
he has this beast form. I just always picture him as really hairy.
Well, I want to talk about it in a little bit when Rhys shifts partly in front of her,
Yeah.
because I was wondering, like, can they shift into whatever they want? Because
thought that too.
I don't think they can.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I always pictured him as like swimmer smooth,
Okay.
only because I don't like a lot of body hair either. So
See, I'm the opposite.
you like some body hair?
I do. I think.
What about you,
I think
Mindy?
it's very manly.
Well,
Mindy, I think you have to say you like
I
body hair.
do. And we'll just leave it at that. But yes, I do.
Minty's like, my type is Darren. The end.
100%.
Sorry, I veered us way
That's
off
okay.
course
I was
there.
actually done. All I wanted to say was that the bouts would have only lasted like 10 or 15 minutes, which is interesting because I
That
don't.
lasts longer than I would have thought.
Yeah,
I know, right?
Yeah. But it's interesting because this section was very detailed in what she was doing and what she was planning, and I feel like it lasted a lot longer than that for her.
Oh yeah, I think so too.
Especially since she was in the pit, like working through stuff. But and then finally, the everything declined in the 5th century and eventually died out completely, and like we don't really have that stuff anymore. So it was just interesting. I thought it felt very Roman gladiator, the whole scene of it, because they had all the people watching, and then there was the fairies that were flying over her and basically like telling them what was going on, like if they couldn't see. And then
It makes me think of what's the game they play on Harry Potter?
Quidditch.
And then over here we got Fairy covering herself in worm shit.
It's funny because I totally see the parallels, but I would not have ever thought about gladiators in this context of like making.
well,
that
because we
comparison. It's really
usually
smart.
we usually think that it's somebody who's a warrior and somebody who's like they're doing that because they want to, and that's what it's usually depicted as. But in general, it's not, which is I thought was interesting.
Yeah, no, I think that the worm fight, the first trial, I think it probably lasted a long time too. And when we don't have to get into like
She had
every
to have
single
enough time
detail
to
of
put
it.
all those bone spikes
Yes,
in, right?
yes. I think it took a long time, and I just kept writing down like Feyre is so smart. Like she's so street smart, and I was thinking
She's
about it.
resourceful and instinctual.
And I'm like, you know, even think all the way through all the books that have been written up to this point, all the way through Silver Flames. I cannot think of a single human character that I think would be able to survive that first trial like she did. I don't
100%.
think anybody could as a human,
Right.
right? I think she's like, it was like uniquely situated just for her.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And the one thing that I wrote down, just an unanswerable question, but when she was trying to climb out of the pit that had all the bones in it for the first time, and one of the fairies is like making fun of her and is like, you need a stool. And that gives her the idea to make the ladder with the bones. I'm like, who was that said that?
Was someone helping her?
Yes. Like, were they trying to be
because
helpful?
she does get help 2 other times. So at one point, Rhysand confirms for her verbally that it can't see.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
She's like, oh, Feyre, or he says Feyre has figured out that it relies on scent.
And she made herself invisible.
Like he wouldn't have normally said that as loud as he would have needed to for her to hear that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then like when she looks up at him, his eyes twinkle.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got Lucian, who once she has set the trap, screams for her that the worm has kind of circled around her and is coming the other way, right?
Right.
And so she does have help. That is interesting, thinking about who that might have been.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other time I wrote down, who is this, is when it was talking about the blue-skinned fairies that were throwing like body parts to the worm. I'm like, who is that they're throwing in there? Like, what happened? What's that story?
Ooh, yeah.
I would love a bonus chapter.
Was
Like,
it
how'd that
Darren?
happen?
Because they said it was a hairy arm.
Poor Darren. I'm glad he doesn't listen to this.
Wah, wah.
You said you think body hair is sexy.
Well, I don't want him to feel.
Singled out.
Yes.
I talk about my husband all the time.
I don't want him to feel self-conscious about it.
Stop growing hair. How dare you?
Yeah. I wrote down too when she that moment you're talking about, Deb, with Rhysand, where he says, you know, the worm is blind. It uses its sense of smell, and she just made herself invisible. I wrote down she painted herself, and that ultimately saved her life, right?
Oh, yeah,
like
that's cool.
painting in a really rudimentary way, right? But that piece of her that is so vital to being herself and being like a whole person played a very instrumental part of surviving this first trial, which I thought was a really cool detail.
I loved that moment too, because it really showed where Rhys was kind of realizing her cunning and really appreciating it, and then she flips him off.
I wrote that down too. Like,
No, I'm sorry. It was vulgar gesture.
yeah, she makes the vulgar gesture, and
Well, I mean, she didn't grab her crotch; she flipped him off.
well, she might have. Yeah.
Maybe she like cupped it like yeah, because he does tell her later she has balls.
That is true.
I wrote down like she does that, and I just think it's funny because she's like, you know, F you, and he's just admiring, like in his own head, like she's so amazing.
What does Nick say on Mean Girl? He's like, "Stop being mean to me, or I'm gonna fall in love with you."
Yeah.
Well, my favorite part of this entire chapter is essentially whenever Feyre, it gets like a little meta because all of a sudden Feyre is attacking people outside the ring, right? So she takes this bone that she strapped across her back on purpose. So as she's laying all these bone spikes in this pit, she's thinking, you know what? I think I'm going to throw this fucking bone at Amarantha when I'm done. So she takes this bone that she has broken across her knee and hurls it at Amarantha like a javelin, which I think is so badass.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
I love it.
That was one of my favorite parts.
I feel like purposely doesn't hit her so that she can get her muddy because it's a bigger insult
Yep.
to
Oh,
do
yeah.
that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And it talks about how like her knuckles were turning white from gripping the throne. She was no longer touching, it says, my Tamlin. And like, I just thought that was so awesome. And you already talked about Hunger Games. It reminds me of when Katniss shoots the apple in the pig's mouth
Yes.
whenever she is like essentially
To
trying
get
out in front
toward
of
the judges.
Yeah. And I really loved that. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool.
I love that too, and just wanted to throw in from chapter 55, actually, from A Court of Mist and Fury. She and Rhysand have already had the whole conversation about like, you know, you're my mate, whatever. And Rhysand tells her that moment when she throws that bone at Amarantha is when he fell in love with her. And he says, I heard Cassian's voice, like, if you don't marry her, you stupid prick, I'm going to. he says, like, you reminded me of Cassian. Like, I felt like you belonged with me,
Yeah.
right? And I just think that's really sweet.
Can we talk a little bit about the Midgard worm and like what it looks like? Because there's a lot of memes and things that go around that are like what I thought the Midgard worm looked like. And it's like the one from SpongeBob or
Yeah.
the
That's the one I've
Beetlejuice
seen.
worm.
Like an earthworm.
Yeah.
That Beetlejuice worm's kind of terrifying
It is kind of
still on its
terrifying.
own.
But then it's like what it actually looks like. And it's interesting because then it made me think, is there any lore about worms? And there's not a ton out there, but all the lore says basically they're dragons. But they're legless dragons. So they look like a snake or a worm, or, you know, they don't have any appendages.
So they're very reptilian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I thought was just really interesting. Plus, then it talks about the different rows of teeth, which reminded me of the Leviathan in Supernatural.
Yes, that's what I thought of, too.
Freaked me out. Once I started thinking about it that way, I'm like, okay, this worm is scary as shit.
Yeah, it does. And I want to know, like, how, because, I mean, it was eating cattle, and it's not a snake technically, so it's not like it's constricting cattle.
Right.
So it's got to be wider than
It's
a
got
cow.
a big old mouth, yeah.
Right, which, you know, is going to take our, Mindy, how tall are you, 5'8"?
5'7".
Oh yeah, 5'7", 5'8". So for me, being like 5'1" and a half, like it could open its mouth and eat me in one bite, literally.
That's terrifying to think about.
It is. Yeah, I'm gonna sleep so
I was
good
gonna say
tonight.
I don't like that. I was thinking, how'd y'all get that in there? Like, where'd that worm come from?
That's what she said. I was like, I gotta say it first.
That was my biggest thing. I need a bonus chapter for who the blue fairies were throwing into the pit, and also how did you all get the worm into the mountain?
What is the creature that's under the library that Cassian is so terrified of? what's its name?
Bryaxis.
Bryaxis. Because I always want to say Abraxas, and that's Manon's dragon guy or whatever. But I'm like, maybe it's him. And he like slithers back to under the library. That would explain why Cassian's so fucking terrified of him.
I know, right?
And Feyre goes down and she's like, "Oh, you want a window? No problem." She's like, "I've already killed one of your brethren.
Help me, please."
Help me! I need a window.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Let's talk about Tamlin, because at the end of trial 1, Feyre looks at Tamlin and he is deathly pale with bright eyes and the ghost of triumph on his face. So I feel like
that could also mean he needs to poop. Have you ever been sweating and pale because you need to poop and like you've got like a grimace on your face? It's called a constipated smile. I think he just had to poop. He's a piece of shit.
I think this was the last ditch. Like for me, like this was the last little scrap of Tamlin might be still like in there and willing to fight for her, and then the whole thing with Lucien happens and I'm like, fuck that shit.
No,
like,
I agree with that,
but I agree. I think there's a little bit there, but not enough.
So last week we named the episode Tamlin, You Ignorant Slut. Maybe we should also name this episode Tamlin, You Ignorant Slut 2.
2.0.
He's still an ignorant slut. No, I totally agree with that. Like, you know, he has this opportunity and continues from this point on, right, to have multiple opportunities to show Feyre that he cares about her, that he loves her, that he is going to try to help her. He is trying to help her, and he just doesn't do any of that.
Because here's the thing, Amarantha doesn't buy his shit.
Well, also,
Right.
You know?
he knows Amarantha is not going to kill him.
Right.
The worst Lucien gets is 20 lashes, which don't get me wrong, I'm sure that's horrific.
Yeah.
But like he's not going to die. Why can't he stick up for her? Everyone else does.
Yeah.
See, that's where I'm like, I do think that he is concerned about her. I think that he feels
Just
concerned.
not enough to be like,
But
oh, no, he's back there going, "No, stop."
Right.
Don't
Like,
do
I
it.
mean, I
Come
do
back.
though. Like, I think that he is concerned about her, but he just doesn't do anything. And that to me,
Because he needs to
honestly,
grow a pair.
That's
My
worse.
worst enemy could be in the pit, and I would jump up and be like, "It's coming from your left."
But see, that's my big problem with Tamlin at this point in the books, right? Is that to me it's worse to feel concern and just ignore it,
and don't do
not
anything.
do
But
anything, than
that's
to
been
not
his-
care at all.
That's
you know?
been his whole MO his entire life.
Well, that's true, but we don't know that. I'm just thinking like in this point in the books, in the series, right? Like if you've only read this part of the first book, there's a lot of backstory that you find out later that you don't know yet.
Right.
You know what I mean? But no, I don't think that he's like unfeeling, but I think he's
Lazy, a
yeah,
dumbass,
I think he's
an
lazy.
asshole.
Here's the thing.
Yeah, I agree
he's-
with that.
I think he's lazy, and I think he's honestly not smart enough to figure out what he needs to do. So, like,
But Lucien hates her and jumps up and says, "To your left." Rhysand is very confused about her and goes, "Oh, well, I guess she found out the Wyrm is blind." Like,
Yeah.
and Tamlin literally sits there,
He just
lets
sits there.
Amarantha play chicken with him, like they're middle schoolers.
It's so interesting to me the dynamic with Lucien versus the dynamic with Tamlin, because my initial thought when I think about Lucien and, you know, why would he do that for her? I'm like, okay, well, Lucien feels indebted to her, right? If only for giving her name instead of letting Rhysand like mess with his mind. And then I'm like, well, but why wouldn't Tamlin also feel that for her? You know what I mean? Like to feel some kind of I owe you because of this, that, or whatever. Like he should 1000% feel that. That makes it worse.
Yeah.
You know?
I'll also say someone she has never met in her entire life, Lucien's mother, comes later and helps her.
Yeah.
And I know that Rhysand says Tamlin's being watched all the time. He's not being watched whenever she's in bed with Rhysand. Like he has to pee sometime, right?
Right.
Like there's no way, like he could have sent someone to give her a message. He could have told Rhysand to give her a message for all he fucking know. Well, I'm sure he would have thought that Rhysand would tell Amarantha, but
Right.
like there are so many things he could have done. He could have just raised his eyebrow at her.
Right.
That's all he needed to do.
Yeah, so far all we get is like a pale face and the
He's
ghost
got
of
the poop sweat.
the ghost
a
of
widening
triumph.
of eyes back at the other one. Yeah.
almost imperceptible widening of his eyes, and it's just like, dude.
And again, maybe he had dust in his eye. Like, I am not giving him any credit.
No, I mean, and my whole thing is, I think that he feels things for her. I don't think that he's like a sociopath that doesn't care about her at all. But that, again, I feel like that makes it worse, because I do think that he thinks he loves her, and I do think that he cares about her. So then it's like, dude, it's even worse than that you don't do anything.
Well, and I will say one of the most heartbreaking points in all of the books for me is when she realizes all of this in book 2.
Oh, yeah.
And she starts crying because she says, like, how did I not see it? And that's when you really, as a reader, also go,
Like, how did I not
holy
see that?
fuck.
Yeah.
Right? But
Yeah.
it, like, I have cried both times I've read that scene, and I'm just like, this is how, and we've said this many times, this is how abuse happens.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't just happen one day and then, like, it never gets better. It comes and
happens in
goes.
layers.
And
Right.
sometimes I worry about myself and my like mental health, because I'm like, well, but he does love her. And it's like, okay, Whitney.
But I'll also say you are really good at seeing the goodness in people, and I don't ever want you to lose that. So, like, that's not
Thanks.
That's not a failure on your part or even a negative part of your personality. It's actually a very positive part of your personality, and you give people the benefit of the doubt. Whereas I'm like, you're dead to me.
Well, and beyond that, it makes for a very interesting character if you think there's more conflicting values with him. So
Yeah, if it's just like a one-dimensional,
Yeah.
he's a sociopath that doesn't care about anybody
Right.
but himself or
I
whatever.
mean, he obviously does care about other people. He just does not have the determination or drive or balls to stand up to anybody.
Yeah.
Like, he just doesn't. He is, I mean, as much as we say, like, oh, well, he sent Feyre away to protect her. Yes, he did. But he's always done things in his best interest. No one
Yeah.
else's.
yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to Rhysand. Rhysand.
Yeah. So
Sassy Rhysand, by the way.
So Feyre breaks her arm, and I had forgotten about this. Her bone is sticking out of her skin.
And she sits like that for
and she's
days.
sitting there trying to will herself to heal. Like, it just breaks my heart.
No, this isn't a fever. This is an infection. Everything's fine. Like, no, honey.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, it's not. And so Rhysand shows up and is basically like, ooh, girl, you are in rough shape. And he offers to help her if she'll make a bargain with him, right? And so he basically says, I will heal your arm for, I think at first he says 3 weeks out of every
2.
month.
He says 2. So like
weeks.
half a
'Cause
year.
I remember
half of her time.
I was
Yeah.
reading it, and I was like, she doesn't go half
That's
the
what
time.
I did too.
Yeah, 2 weeks. And then they go back and forth.
She bargains with him. I love that.
She says, I can't remember.
negotiates.
She says 5 days or something.
5 days,
Yeah.
and
Then he says 10 days, and she says, how about a week? And
Yeah.
and I just know inside his own head, Rhysand is like, I will literally take just 7
One
seconds.
day.
Yeah.
One day
Not
a
even a
month.
day. Like, I'll take
Yeah.
whatever you can give me.
Well, can we talk a little bit about deals and bargains in the Fae world? Because we see this in a lot of books, and anyone that is listening to this podcast or any podcast that has the word nerd in it knows that bargains in the Fae world are never a positive thing. And even Alice earlier in the book tells her, don't make any bargains, even if your life depends on it. You know, don't do this, don't do this. And this is the second bargain she's made. So Amarantha, like, I don't really feel like she had a choice, and ultimately she didn't really have a choice here either when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk
Wait,
a little.
Amarantha?
No, Feyre.
She didn't have a choice with Amarantha's bargain.
Oh, okay.
And then she really didn't have a choice with Rhysand's either, because she knew she was getting an infection, right? Okay, so a little bit of backstory on Fae and bargains. So a lot of people say that deals and bargains are the foundation of Fae survival, which makes sense, right? We hear about this a lot. And then some Fae, some types of Fae, are unable to give anything away for free, and there must always be a balance. So I have a question for you guys. If Rhysand was one of those Fae that there had to be a balance, do you feel like him saving her life is equal to 1 week a month? Like, is that a balanced bargain? Or to your point, would he have taken, you have 30 minutes a month?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's balanced at all. I think he would literally have taken, I was actually just thinking, not only would he have taken literally anything, he would have figured out a way to heal her, whether she took the bargain or not.
Right.
Right. He
'Cause-
wasn't going to let her die.
Right. And, you know, of course she doesn't know that. And as the reader, you don't know that yet either. I would be interested to see that play out, though. Like,
Yeah.
if she just straight up refuses him, how is he going to heal her anyway? You know,
he does kind of help her realize that you realize no one else is coming.
Yeah.
Tamlin can't come. Lucian's not been, and that's when we find out Lucian's actually been whipped.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't know how bad Lucian's beating was, and so he pretty much helps her and the reader understand, like, I might literally be your only hope. They don't really care if you die down here.
Yeah.
Right. So back to the bargain. So you will find, and I was trying to think of a book where this was different, and I can't find one. So Fae use their abilities with words often to give the upper advantage. So they rarely put their bargains into writing to ensure that the Fae have room to use misleading language and to change the bargain later. Right? So much like Amarantha not saying when she would release everyone if Feyre won the trials, right? Which Feyre realizes too late. And she's like, oh, fuck. Well, at least if I figure out this riddle that has a one-word answer, Love, I'll be able to get out of here.
Well, and also Rhysand, doesn't specify when the weeks are going to start and when he can show up.
Other than when this trials business is over.
Right.
Yeah.
And he interrupts her wedding to start her first week at the night court.
So according to, and I do not know how to pronounce this, and I'm assuming it's Gallic, so if someone can tell us, that would be super rad, but it's Lairbhan, which is probably like Fernanigan or something, because Gallic is just so like I've read that learning like U.S. English is the hardest language to learn, but I don't know how to pronounce that. So someone please tell us. So LAIRBHAN.blogspot.com has some recommendations when it comes to bargaining with the Fae. So number 1, start small. Don't ask for immortality. Maybe ask for them to get rid of your infection. Number 2 is bribe them. So when it comes to Fae, nothing is ever free. And if something's not offered in payment up front, Fae may set a payment later on and say that you owe them a favor. So owing a favor to a Fae, according to this person, is like owing a favor to the mob, which I'm like, it kind of is.
Yeah,
if you think about it. Number 3, and we see Feyre do this in both of her bargains, negotiate. Ask yourself why they want what they want. And it's also okay to say no to a demand, which, again, like, you're probably so scared shitless. You're like, okay, please just don't kill me, right?
Right.
Number 4, have good manners, but never say thank you. Thank you implies a favor and that you still owe them a debt.
Ooh.
Number 5, keep things tidy if you want to go into a bargain with the Fae. So the way that people used to keep Fae away is they would piss on their land.
Yikes.
And I'm like, and I wrote down, we know women didn't figure that one out. Like, women don't just like, I'm just going to piss on it. That was definitely a guy thing. And number 6, have an escape plan or backup plan because shit's going to go sideways, even in the best deals. And we see this in both of these deals.
Yeah.
Know when to run or when to bluff. And it also says, know how far you're willing to go to get out of a deal. Are you willing to kill someone? Are you willing to hurt people around you to get out of this deal?
Yeah.
So I thought his were really, really great on getting out of a bargain. I found another one. Layla A.M. Martin, she's a fantasy author, has 4 tips on how to bargain with the Fae. Number 1, don't. Number 2, seriously, don't. Number 3, don't assume anything, she says. Bargains are always more beneficial for the Fae. And be sure to work out every detail possible in the bargain. And then number 4, but really, just don't. And we, like, she's been warned by Alice. Both of these bargains do bite her in the ass in different ways, right? It's definitely more beneficial for the Fae. But, I mean, do you feel like she ultimately had a choice with Rhysand? I mean, you're saying he probably would have come back and healed her, but she still thinks he's a villain.
Right.
Yeah.
She doesn't know that. I think that ultimately he was going to help her no matter what. He would have figured out a way to help her.
But that's knowing what we already know about him.
Exactly.
Yeah,
From
and she
her
doesn't know that.
perspective, I don't think she thinks she has a choice at all because he's ultimately like right about nobody else coming to help her.
Did he have to be that evil? Like, did he have to twist the bone in her arm?
I've forgotten about that.
I
thought it was a little overkill. Like,
I wrote that down.
Was like, yikes.
Yeah, I wrote that down as one of the examples of Rhysand doing something really bad that I feel like the fandom kind of bends over backwards to try to justify.
If Tamlin had done this at this point in the book, we would have lost our shit.
Everybody would be rioting.
100%. I agree with you.
Like, was it necessary? That's sort of what I was thinking. Like, was it necessary?
I would
say no also.
I would say no. I think he obviously thought it was necessary or he wouldn't have done it,
right.
First of all, knowing what we know about Rhysand as a character, right? I think that was just the quickest way to get her to agree. And that was his ultimate goal, was to get her to agree. He gets
frustrated with her, so maybe that was part of that frustration.
Maybe.
I don't know.
But no, I did write that down too because I thought that was too far.
It was excessive.
I do not like that he did that.
I wonder if because I'm looking in my book right now, I wonder if he was in her mind that at that point and she didn't know, because he says, "How much are you willing to risk on the hope that another form of help will come?" And it says, I stared at him, sending as much hate as I could into my gaze. He'd been the one who'd caused all of this. He told Amarantha about Claire, and he'd made Tamlin beg. And then she said, go to hell. And that's when he did it. So, I mean, I'm with you. It kind of sounds like she pissed him off, which is not cool.
Yes.
But he also could have been in her mind going like, well, she's not going to fucking believe me. So, but it does not make it okay. He should not have done that.
Because he keeps doing it. Like, he does it more than once. Like, I feel like. I think so. I think he does it, and then he does one more at the end. I feel like she says. I don't know. It seems very excessive for what he's trying to do. And I get what he's trying to do. Believe me. I get that she needs to, and she needs to hate him too. And I get that also. Right. But she kind of already does. And I feel like it goes a little over the top.
Well, and I did feel for him a little bit, just from the perspective of like, I'm trying to keep her safe. And part of that is I need her to hate me and I need her to not trust me because that's how everybody sees me. And I need everybody to keep seeing me like that. And so I don't know if that played a part in him hurting her. But I don't like that happened, and that's something that like just isn't talked about ever again.
I agree.
He never says I did that because blah, blah, blah.
He explains a lot of stuff, and that's not one of them. And I don't like. I wish that if you're going to give us a Rhysand POV and explain all this stuff that happened, like.
Well, he does a lot of
throw that one in there.
He does a lot of bad shit, honestly.
Right.
And
Yes,
so maybe
does.
Sarah J. Maas just forgot that he did
that. She couldn't keep up with.
Or she was like, God, I can't think of another excuse for that shit. So I'm just gonna like sweep that one under the rug.
One thing that I did notice that I really, really liked was she was thinking about whether or not she should take the bargain. Like, is Tamlin worth it? Like, yes, I think he is. And she thought about Nesta. Like, she was thinking about who would take that bargain for her.
Yeah.
And she immediately thought Nesta would.
Yeah.
Which again, I'm like. She spent that whole stupid paragraph talking about like, I'm so proud to be Elaine's sister. But every time, the crap hits the fan, she's thinking about Nesta and how Nesta would come through for her. And so I just wanted to point that out. Nesta is fantastic.
Yeah, Elaine's not going to go down into a worm. She would be like,
oh
no,
gosh.
Here's a flower.
Again, like Feyre is the only human character that as a human could do that trial. Like I don't think anybody else could have done that. And then one other red flag before we move on to her tasks. The last red flag that I wrote down for this section was, Rhysand brands her arm, basically, right? Like she's got this big black tattoo, like all over her arm.
With the eyeball on her
hand.
It
goes into the bargain, though, because one of the things I did read about Fae bargains is there's always some sort of visible mark with the Fae bargain. Yes. And she says, you didn't tell me that was part of the bargain. And he goes, well, you didn't ask.
Exactly.
Right. Is the eye...
But here's the thing, though. She did ask, well, what flesh this out for me,
well,
please.
That's
and
not
he said,
necessarily a term.
It's not specific enough of a
I
question.
guess so. But when she was like, well, what else is what else is going on? And I love how he's like, well, I'm not going to tell you. That wouldn't be very fun.
Yeah, there's no fun in that.
Right. And we forget these Fae can lie.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
So, if this was the Cruel Prince, like Carden can't say anything that he doesn't mean,
Yes.
But Whitney, because I know that you'll know this, can he see through the eye tattooed on her hand?
I don't know that we're ever explicitly told.
Because she keeps saying it's kind of like one of those creepy paintings that follows you around the room.
We are given several details throughout the Under the Mountain section and the beginning of Mist and Fury where it seems like the eye is reacting to her and reacting to things that are happening. But I don't know if he actually sees her through it or if that's just like a visual representation of their bond.
Right.
I'm not really sure. I think that he can probably see through it, but I think he sees a lot more through the bond, and that maybe like I think the eye is his way of like hiding the bond from her and from other people.
I see.
But I don't think we're ever told
Yeah.
one way or the other.
Right.
But I did want to say about her tattoos on her arm. She freaks out immediately and is like, "Oh crap, Tamlin is going to be so pissed."
Yeah, she's like, Tamlin's going to lose his
right.
shit.
And I'm just like,
Red flag.
man, right? Well, okay. He literally cannot be bothered to show any kind of
But
feeling.
you're worried about him seeing your tattoo.
Yes, like, you know, you literally just got thrown into like the pit of despair, right? And could have died, almost died.
Why didn't Tamlin go to Rhysand and go, if you go heal her, I'll make a bargain with you?
Yeah,
I'll owe you a
exactly.
favor. You know,
Yeah,
I'll do
right.
something
High
for
Lord to
you.
High Lord.
Exactly. Or anybody. Like, he could have said
Yeah.
that to Lucian has power back, right?
Lucian's mom was able to get to
Lucian's
her.
mom
Yeah.
was able to get to her. Like, I feel like probably any of the High Lords would have been able to get to her if Tamlin had a relationship with any of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, they're all kind of pissed off at him because
Yeah.
they've
Yes.
been tortured for 49 years. So
Right.
maybe he tried. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
maybe, but
Whoa.
ugh, yeah.
What happened to Deborah?
I've had cocktails.
I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, and like hell froze over.
I'm feeling very generous.
So the rest of the section in these chapters is Feyre's. She's got two tasks that I'm assuming are coming from Amarantha ultimately.
Yeah, they're the household tasks she told her she'd have to do to earn her
right.
keep.
We don't hear from Amarantha in this in these tasks, but her lackeys basically tell Feyre, you have to do this, you have to do that. So the first task that she's given is she's supposed to basically like mop a floor that's super dirty, but the water is
Already dirty.
enchanted
Yeah.
basically to like
turn
get
into mud.
dirtier and
Yeah.
dirtier and dirtier. So it's like an impossible task, right? And so this is what you alluded to earlier, Deb, about Lucian's mom comes in and does magic on the water to
Can I
make it
point
clean.
out too? This is like a mother he's not talked to in how many years?
I know. I'd
We
forgotten
don't
about
know
this
how
part.
many years.
Right. And like it's so like and we know that Lucian's not his dad's son, right? His dad that's in the court. And so she is coming from a place of love. I can't imagine as a mother the amount of guilt that you feel over not being able to speak to your child.
Yeah.
So she is so thankful to Feyre for, you know, saying her name so that Lucian would be spared, even though quite frankly, so far Lucian's the only one that's taken anything for her under the mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So far. And I mean, he is the one that most vehemently has said he hates her.
True. Yeah, that's true.
Maybe
Interesting.
Lucian loves her.
Actions speak louder than words, Lucian.
Ooh, that's an interesting. Maybe Lucian loves her. And Lucian is his mom's favorite child because he is the child with the person that she actually loves and not her husband.
And who is that? Do we know? Remind me.
Helion.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Which we don't know that until book 3, but he is her favorite. And so she basically helps Feyre enchants the water or unenchants the water, I guess, makes it clean instead
Right.
of enchanted to be dirty so that she can actually finish that task.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about the description of Lady Autumn because it kind of harkens back to what you were talking about last week about the adder and the amaranth and the descriptions and how they move. I just thought it was beautiful and such a beautiful picture when she described her voice as sweet as sun-warmed apples. And then she said, I could have sworn, this is as she's leaving, I could have sworn I smelled roasting chestnuts and crackling fires in her wake.
Have you ever had
that.
a fresh apple off a tree when it's warm like that? It is literally the sweetest, juiciest, decadent thing you can have. And it really does paint a picture.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like painting pictures of what autumn would be if it was personified, I think that was just beautiful.
And idyllic too, right?
Yeah.
Like the ideal, like romanticized
Well,
autumn.
and she is supposed to be this very classy, romantic woman, right? That has had to give up a lot of shit for her court. Just like most women do in their lives. Mm-hmm. We're not bitter about it.
So then task 2 is the lackeys, the guards, I don't know how to say the lesser fae.
Cronies is
the
what
cronies.
they call them.
Oh, yeah, thank you. The cronies take Feyre to this room that's real bare bones, and there's like...
Except for the black
She
sheet.
even says, does anyone even sleep
yes,
in
it
here?
looks like nobody even lives there. And they said, somebody spilled a bunch of lentils in the fireplace. You need to find all the lentils. And so it seems pretty clear that the fireplace is enchanted to constantly keep having new lentils, right? Like you'll never be finished picking them out. And they threaten her in the first task, I think, with putting her on the spit and like rotating her over the fire. And then for this second task, they say the owner of this room will like peel the skin off of your body.
Yeah.
And then the owner of the room ends up being Rhysand. And we're all
Can we talk about how
like,
awesome
good.
his entrance was? He knows how to make
Just
an
like
entrance.
appears out of the shadows
Like,
or whatever.
Sideways on the bed with his head. I see him like in this like
The Burt Reynolds pose.
Yes. Yes. Well, and he's like, I love seeing you in my room, but why are you in the fireplace?
So here, it's the first time, though, that he calls her Feyre, darling.
I know. I wrote that down. Too.
I wrote hearts around it because it says, as wonderful as it is to see you, Feyre, darling, do I want to know why you're digging through my fireplace?
Yeah.
I love sassy Rhysand.
I know. Well, and so she tells him, they sent me here to do this. And he's like, ugh, that's so stupid. And so he uses his magic to clean it up himself, right? And at the end of the section, when they come back to get her, the cronies, Rhysand does his, what is it, Daemati power to tell them, like, stop giving her these stupid jobs, quit messing with her, don't touch her, and if you do, I'm gonna, you kill yourself, gut yourself. Yeah. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that interaction because they have a little bit of a conversation, right? So main level or base level, he helps her. Just like the Lady of Autumn Court did, right? But the Lady of Autumn Court helped her because she felt that she owed her, kind of the bargain thing that you were just talking about, right? Like, you saved my son.
She even says my debt is owed.
My debt is paid, right? Like, I owe you, so I'm going to help you with this, and now I'm done with you. And she doesn't talk to her like ever again, right? And so Rhysand is helping her in Feyre's mind for no good reason.
Yeah.
Right? Like and we know
they don't give things for free.
Right. We know why he's helping her because he loves her and he knows that she's his mate, right? But Feyre doesn't know that. But not only does he help her, he also protects her from the cronies by telling them, don't mess with her, and if you do, kill yourself.
And then she gets hot meals every day after that.
Yeah, that's true.
She gets actual food. Yeah.
Here's my question about that. What does Amarantha think about that? If she's the one giving her these tasks and making her do this stupid stuff, and then all of a sudden it stops.
I assume she doesn't know that he somehow made sure that the cronies wouldn't tell her that it wasn't happening.
Well, and I assume too that Amarantha is not necessarily like, today make her go mop the floor with this guy. I feel like Amarantha probably was like, mess with her when you feel like it, scare the shit out of her, make her do stupid crap that she can't possibly do.
And that's and they thought that was that was just their
fun.
So
it's not necessarily like, well, you were supposed to go do this today. How come that didn't happen?
I just think it's weird. I don't know. I just feel like, we talk about Amarantha and how she just kind of knows what everybody's doing and she's got her thumb on everything and she's got everybody on a short leash.
For the record, I don't think she does. She doesn't know everything Rhysand's doing. And
well, I know she doesn't, but I mean, I think she keeps them all on a pretty short
But I feel
leash.
like she is so evil. She's consistently concocting a plan to like mess with someone. So she doesn't have time to worry about one person all the time.
And the only thing I thought about was that maybe she's just so arrogant that she doesn't think that anybody would do that. And so that's where I went with it. I just thought it was just something I questioned. I also questioned, like, do you think Rhysand really didn't know that they were doing that stuff to her?
Maybe not, because if Amarantha is not giving specific daily,
it makes me think that Amarantha
assignments.
I guess I always thought that Amarantha was it just told him a lot of stuff, but I guess she's just taking sex and that's it.
I think that she does tell him some stuff because in book 2, when
Pillow Talk's a real thing. They talk about it on true crime podcasts all the time. Like right after sex, people like just
they
say whatever the fuck they want. Yeah.
Well, in book 2, Rhysand tells Feyre that he was really good at his job and he was able to mess with Amarantha's mind at least to make her think that he was really into it just like she was. Right. And so he is able to trick her, make her think things that aren't true. So it's possible to me that he would be able to like make Amarantha forget something or make her think something happened when it actually didn't. If he's able to make her think that he wants her. Well, and here's the thing too. You know?
So then that makes that whole thing with Tamlin where he's quote unquote guarded all the time, but he can't get to her, makes that even worse because obviously Rhys can break away and do stuff, and I feel like he's sort of, she kind of knows what he's doing, his every move as well. So it just makes me hate Tamlin more.
Yeah.
Rhys also is probably anyone when he's like on his way. He's like, you don't remember this. Like
that is true. I wonder,
do
you think he can Demati Amarantha?
He does. He does, at least in making her think that he...
Oh, in the bed.
Like he makes her believe that he wants her, that he is into the sex, that he is...
So then I guess as powerful as he is, even with the scrap of magic, he can't do anything to get rid of her?
I don't think that he believes that he can do it by himself because he tried to do it by himself before and it didn't work.
Well,
twice.
And he knows he really doesn't have any allies because they all think he's a horrible person.
Yeah,
right.
That's true. So he can't get help because he's made it that way.
He's not willing to go get the people that actually are his allies.
Because he doesn't want to sacrifice him.
Right.
So I have a friend that listens to the podcast, and she messaged me the other day, and she said, I'm noticing in these books that the sexual abuser is always a woman. And I was like, I hadn't really thought about it that way. And we don't really see much of, we see it a little bit of Rhysand's trauma of the rape, right? Yeah. Essentially. And it makes me think about that scene in Outlander after the, what does she call herself? The redheaded chick whenever she rapes young Ian. Right, whenever the Bakra. He gets taken by the pirates, and they're taking her, and she's trying to find her sapphires, right? And she's essentially making these virgins fuck her. And he says, "Well, I'm not a virgin," and she says, "Well, at least you'll know what you're doing." And then, like 2 seasons later, he breaks down about it, about how he was forced into this rape, and he talks to Jamie about it because Jamie's also been raped. And I'm thinking about Rhysand not really probably being able to go to Feyre about it because it's like, well, you were tortured and almost died, and I looked like I was having fun.
Right.
The whole, like, you know what I mean? So it doesn't touch on that very much, and I wonder if it ever will. That's a tough subject matter to tackle.
Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting to me about that is that the only person that we're aware of that has any kind of understanding about that is Nesta, who... Like she and Rhys hate each other because they're so similar. They have really similar personalities and really
they're both
similar
strong
trauma.
personalities.
Yeah, and I don't know. I want to say that I hope that gets explored, but at the same time, I don't want it to be. You know what I mean? Like that's a touchy subject, and that's hard to. I feel like that's
really
hard to do well.
write.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like it could be. I mean, I'm sure some of this is very triggering for fans, right? And I do wonder if she stays away from that to make sure that she's kind of keeping her fans safe too. Sarah J. Maas, not Nesta.
Although Nesta would want to keep people safe.
She would.
Only a few people, though. In that conversation with Rhysand and Feyre in his room, he tells her, I just noticed a couple things. He tells her some very intimate personal facts about himself. He shows her his wings and talons, a little bit of that beast form, which is part of what makes me think that he has no control over what the beast form is, like you were asking earlier, because he tells her on more than one occasion, I think, that he really does not like to go into that beast form. He doesn't like that monster, and I feel like if he could change that form, he would to make it more palatable for him.
If you've read all the books, you know that Cassian and Azrael, they have their wings out at all times, and so if Rhysand was cool with the beast form, he would too. Right? His buddies do, but he hides them away most of the time. Yeah,
right.
Also because he's powerful enough to do so. I mean, we read about how Cassian can't get comfortable in the chairs in the human world and stuff. So because Rhysand can hide it, maybe he's like, well, I'm not going to fuck with all that. He doesn't hide it though when he wants Feyre to stroke them.
Well,
How interesting. I never would have thought wing membranes could be so hot.
he explains to Feyre a little bit about himself and some of the things that he's done, because she calls him out like, you brought that head to the spring court, and he's like, Amarantha made me do that. That wasn't me. That was her. And he does her task for her and commands the guards to leave her alone. And I just noticed, we talked a lot about how long it took Tamlin to be vulnerable with Feyre at all and to share anything about his life, anything personal about himself. And Rhysand is just like automatically like, here's one of my deepest, darkest secrets, this beast form that I really, really hate. Here, I'll show you. Right. And it's just, he's so different from Tamlin.
Well, that had a dual purpose too, though, because I think that would freak her out a little bit more and realize how powerful he is as well.
But I think also he had no one he could talk to.
Right.
True.
So it was nice to have someone, and he was trying to build her trust ultimately.
Yep.
So, hey, I'm going to share this super personal thing with you that I can't talk to anyone else about. And I feel like Feyre is really the only person that knows how much power he has left.
No, I think that's true. Yeah, because he's hiding it from everybody else. Right.
Why would he show that?
And think about how much his life is walking on eggshells. So he's trying really hard to like build trust with Feyre, but he's got to keep up this ruse that he's, an asshole. That's that's two very different things. Like, if you can't be an asshole to somebody and then gain their trust. So you got to think about how mentally exhausting that is to try to walk that fine line. I think that's a little sad to me.
Which, again, is another parallel, I think, between Rhysand and Nesta. When we talked about Nesta, all the inner turmoil and mental stuff that she's struggling with because she wasn't glamored, and Elaine and her dad both were. And Rhysand is the same way, right? Like, he's got all this stuff in his head that nobody knows is happening. And he's by himself, completely isolated. And again, it's like, Nesta knows what that is like, but you guys hate each other. So I guess you won't be helping each other out. And the only other thing I noticed or noted about Rhysand in this section is he has put himself in a position to be able to basically snap his fingers and help Feyre without retribution, without really worrying about it. Like, where's Tamlin? Tamlin could probably use the excuse of like, well, I was worried about you. I didn't want to make things worse. I didn't want to make Amarantha more upset, whatever. Like, I can see Tamlin very easily, and Lucien on his behalf, very easily arguing, it would have been worse, right? Yeah. And Rhysand has put himself in a position where, like, I got you. Like, I'll take care of you, and it's not going to get worse.
I want to point out, though, again, I feel like we've talked about this like 5 weeks in a row. Tamlin showing no emotion in these scenes when he stabbed himself with his own claws earlier in the book. Yeah. It's not like he learned willpower whenever he went under the mountain. Right. Yeah. So like it literally, goes back to that like laziness. I can't show emotion, and I get that, right? I get that a little bit. But at the same time, I'm going to disconnect myself so much that whenever you said something to me, I stabbed myself. But in this, it's like, my eyes widened.
I will say, and I'm definitely not like being on Tamlin's side here, but I will say, taking it out of the context, when you're in a traumatic situation like that, it is a lot easier to block out the shit.
That's true. That's true. Like, let's say that. Thank you.
Yeah, because, if you're, all the people that go through therapy that have to do hypnotism or whatever to get that out because they blocked that out. That's the only excuse I can even think of, that he's just seriously just trying to block it out of his mind.
That's an important call out for mental health. Like, thank you for saying that.
Well, that's kind of where I always go back to when I think about Tamlin, right? And how complex of a character he is. And because he is also a victim in this whole situation, right? Yeah. And that's really where I struggle with, like, what should I really be mad about? And why should I really? And there's a lot of stuff to be upset with him about.
Well, and I've said this a million times. Technically, I'm a victim, and I don't do this kind of shit.
No, that's true.
But you have to be willing to get help, and you have to have someone you can confide in. Like, some people can never get help, and like I also want to say that, right? Yeah. Like, I have lived a privileged enough life to have people that support me and to have a therapist and all of that.
And you have to want to get help too.
You do, and you have to want to break the cycle, and that's very, very hard.
Well, and the thing with Tamlin is like we don't get his point of view like ever, right? We only ever see.
We don't want it. We've said that a million times.
But I'm just saying, like we don't get his POV. We only see or hear what's going on from all these other characters' perspectives. And so
they all hate him, too.
We have to just make a bunch of assumptions about Tamlin, which may or may not be correct with what Sarah J. Maas is thinking when she's writing. You know what I mean? And so that's why I'm always like feeling wishy-washy, I guess, about Tamlin. Because I feel like unless I got a POV of Tamlin, I feel like I don't really have enough information to be definitive of like
you suck
or no you don't and here's why either way. You know what I mean? That's why I always sound like sometimes I hate him and sometimes I don't.
I kind of feel like I do that too.
We've said this a million times too. Every character in these books is morally gray.
Oh,
yes,
for
Some
sure.
of them are more evil than others, but everyone is messed up in these books.
Yes.
Even Feyre.
Which speaks
Even
to
Elaine.
which speaks to reality. Like nobody is perfect.
Excuse me?
Except for Deborah.
I'm far from it, y'all.
And so I'm not going to say everybody's morally gray, but I mean, everybody struggles with that.
We kind of are, though.
You know? And so it just makes it more real to me. Like, if you can take this world where there's fairies and all this, like, fantastical stuff and make it feel like emotionally it could happen, it's kind of amazing. Again, she's a brilliant writer. I just love her writing.
It's kind of the same thing we talked about a few weeks ago when we did the Supernatural Christmas episode about it's this world set up where it's pretty fantastical and not super realistic with the supernatural elements, but it's the relationships and it's the human nature that grounds it.
But a good writer gets you to understand and believe in their rules, and that's why I love fantasy literature so much, because you can write about a relationship, right? Like we all read It Starts With Us a few weeks ago and all loved it, right? And I'm not saying that that's not brilliant writing. I'm not a huge Coho fan, but I love those two books, and I did read Verity. But getting into a fantasy world and going, here's the rules, they're different from anyone else's. Wings are hot. Wingspan also equates to BDE, and it's the same thing in like The Cruel Prince. Like, you don't care that Cardan has a tail, right? And there's all these books coming out now where like the trigger warning is like they're monster fuckers, like, you know what I mean? But like, to get you to understand these people in terms of like personality instead of like what they look like or what they do, I think is amazing writing. And that's why I will always read this type of book. And I read to escape. I know not everyone does that.
No, I do too. The only other thing I really wanted to talk about was just a little paragraph from chapter 54 of Court of Mist and Fury. Rhysand doesn't have a ton to say about the first trial and the bargain specifically, but here's what he says about it when he tells Feyre later on. So I watched your first trial, always pretending to be that person you hated. When you were hurt so badly against the Wyrm, I found my way in with you. A way to defy Amarantha, to spread the seeds of hope to those who knew how to read the message, and a way to keep you alive without seeming too suspicious, and a way to get back at Tamlin. To use him against Amarantha, yes, but to get back at him for my mother and sister and for having you. When we made that bargain, you were so hateful that I knew I had done my job well. And that just makes me sad.
I'm like, tear.
I know. Like he's helping Feyre, and this kind of goes to that morally gray side of Rhysand, right? Like, I'm gonna help you because I want you to be okay, and I need you to help save my people, but I'm also gonna use you to like stick it to Tamlin because he killed my mom.
I stick it to Tamlin. But she even realizes that in this. I forgot about that too. She mentions in here. She's like, of course, he's just wants to screw over Tamlin. Yeah.
And she doesn't even know like the depth.
She doesn't know the reasons.
Yes. The depth of why they are the way that they are with each other. And she finds all that out later in book 2. But that just made me sad. Like, it's another one of those like, that's really not great, Rhysand. Like you're made this person that you are going to come to love and be so, or already do love, and she's going to be so important to you, and you're like, and I used you to get back at this guy that I really hated. Like, that's a little rough, but
yeah.
Did you guys have anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No.
Well, let's do our nerdiest thing. Who wants to go first? Me? Oh, well, my nerdiest thing this week, it was my birthday, and my husband got me a hotel room to sit by myself in the quiet and read. And so that's what I did.
Fantastic.
It was great.
I did fill you up with Cuban food and some cocktails.
Yes, that's true. They do have the happy hour with like free drinks, which was great. But I told Robbie, I was like, that was awesome. Thank you so much. I would like that for my birthday and for Mother's Day and for our anniversary and for like just
your anniversary. Hey,
yeah,
for our anniversary, let's not hang out. Let's
Also, don't forget, like at this specific hotel, the bartender for happy hour knows us as the book club girls because we go there for our reading weekends, and we don't miss free happy hour. I mean,
No,
for goodness
never.
sakes.
Everybody came trickling down from their rooms.
Yeah, they did.
Happy hour, but it was really, really nice. I finished the Red Queen, and
What'd you think?
I really liked it. It's not.
Did you understand my parallels that I told you to Divergent?
Yes,
Hunger
I was just
Games?
about to say it isn't the most like unique story that I've ever read, but I really like it. I like the characters. It's a little bit more YA than it is, like ACOTAR than compared to ACOTAR, but I really like it. And I'm about halfway through book 2, which I can't remember what it's called. And then I'm going to continue to say that I'm nerding out to the Callan May song by Taylor Ash.
Do you want to tell everyone
I just rock out to it in the
about
car all
our
the time.
cool news about her?
I know, yeah. She's going to come on the podcast for an interview in a couple of months.
So
I know, I'm
excited.
really excited to talk to her. She's an ACOTAR fan as well. So
I mean, obs.
obviously, yeah. That's me. That's my nerdiness. Mindy, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll go next. So it was winter break and I work in a school. So I had like a few days before I started back to school, and I just like read for several hours every day, literally stayed on the couch. And
That sounds great.
It was lovely. So I did finish the Pucked series by Helena Hunting. So there's 7 books in that. And then there's an 8th one called Pucks and Penalties that's like outtakes and stuff like that. And within it is a little novella, I guess, that's a crossover with one of her other worlds. And so I found out that Helena Hunting also writes, aside from hockey porn, tattoo parlor porn. So I'm really excited about it.
Ooh, I want to read that.
It's the Clipped Wings series.
Clipped Wings. I tell my husband, and he'll tell you this too, and I think we've told you guys, he edits the podcast, but I'm like, if you had tattoos, we would have 11 children. What's it called again?
It's called the Clipped Wings series. That's the first book is
Okay.
Clipped Wings. But anyway, so I'm really excited to start that. And then the other thing that I had was podcast related, actually. So I was coming home from stocking my kid up for college. We did a Target run and stocked her up with food and whatnot. And my neighbor across the street, who I found out recently does listen to our podcast occasionally. I know. Shout out to Casey.
Hey, Casey.
He stopped me, like he was like, "Hey, Mindy," and said that he just to tell me that the etymology of Amarantha was hilarious
What, that she's a bitch?
because she's a bitch. So anyway, I was like, "Oh, that's so sweet."
I love that. Okay, so our nerdiest cocktail of the week is the Drunken Wyrm. It's got some coconut rum and some blue curacao, and it's got gummy worms in it. So you're really going to want to eat it. And you could soak your gummy worms overnight in the alcohol. I'm just saying. You should do that. And that's why we post them 24 hours in advance. My other thing is last week, Whitney did announce our season 2. It's going to be From Blood and Ash. And ever since we announced that, it's like all I can think about because no offense to Sarah J., but From Blood and Ash is probably one of my top series of all time at this point. I read it like 18 months ago and I've read it 4 times since then. It's my ACOTAR for Whitney right now. But I got really inspired in my design shop to make these book nooks where he gives her the pledge, right? Where he's like, essentially, what does he say, Whit? Because you're so much better at this.
Like
than
from
me.
this moment to the last
And
moment.
I'm yours.
Yeah.
And so like I created these little book nooks for it, and that's all I can fucking think about. I'm like, I just need Hawk in my life so bad. So I can't wait for those books. I mean, but having said that, I'm sitting here thinking I'm going to have to get Wings and Fury on audiobook because I'm not done with ACOTAR yet. Again.
Mist and Fury?
Mist and Fury. Thank you. What did I say? Wings and
Wings
Fury?
and Fury.
Not Wings and Ruin, not Wings and Fury.
Yeah.
Mist and Fury.
You need to tell them too what these books are because they're really, really cool. Like,
Yeah, I'll have to post a picture with the podcast, but essentially it's like a little thing you put on your bookshelf. It's got a spot for your glasses, but if you don't have glasses, you could put snacks there. It's got a spot for your favorite beverage. It holds a huge coffee mug, and then it's got a spot to drape your book over it or to prop up your like reading device if you use a Kindle.
they're super cool and like
thank
genius.
You. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's really cool.
I actually just made a Cruel Prince one today too, and my next one is going to be Throne of Glass. So I'll make some generic ones for the non-nerds, but right now I'm just making nerd stuff. But I've been I love getting inspired by pop culture, and I've been so inspired this week, and I was really burnt out after Christmas from Christmas orders. So
Yeah.
it kind of revived me having our announcement for season 2. So it's really exciting.
Awesome. Well, that is it for today's episode. Next week, we will be talking about chapters 39 and 40. See you then.
We're almost done.
I know.
Bye.
Bye.
For exclusive content and to keep up with all things nerdy, follow us on Instagram at Our Nerdiest Thing. We post book reviews, what to read next, and our cocktail recipes. Have something nerdy that you'd like to share? Email us at ournerdiestthing@gmail.com. This podcast is edited and produced by The Story Guides. Thanks for listening.